Commissioner Cook, I appreciated your response with regard to the challenge and the opportunity of recruiting the next generation of firefighters. My team will be in touch with your team. We have a really neat and innovative approach in Southern New York County with the Southern New York County Fire Camp. It is July 28th to August 1st, and we would love to have you down and show you something that we think is working pretty well, and maybe talk about some opportunities to do things better in the future. So thank you for your consideration of that invitation.
Yeah, I appreciate the invite, and I will make sure we show up.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Director Padfield, if I could return to a conversation with regard to the governor's budget proposal. It includes reductions to the general fund disaster relief funds. So can you explain the circumstances when state funds are used for disaster relief?
Sure. So those reductions would probably be most likely associated, and I'm not sure what specific funds you're talking about, but they're usually reductions in the state match that is required for whatever the projects happen to be. So when we see that, the reductions in spending authority would be associated with anything that is an open project that we're starting to close out. So we may not need the spending authority, obviously, on that side. But usually if you see those reductions, they're reductions in the, as the programs or as the projects move through, it's a reduction in what we need to be able to cover the non-federal match.
Okay, so when exactly does a disaster reach that level of receiving federal FEMA relief or reimbursement?
So it has to be declared as a major disaster, and there are two different types. It's really individual assistance and it's really public assistance. So public assistance is a lot easier to be able to explain. That is a straight threshold for municipalities and counties to be able to meet, and that's about a $24.5 million threshold across the state. There's also a county per capita that they need to reach. So to give you an idea, during the remnants of Hurricane Debbie, there were 13 counties that achieved their per capita that actually received a major disaster declaration for public assistance. Individual assistance is a little different. There are 6 different factors they look at. A lot of it is revolving around the amount of damage to homes. So it's usually 600 to 800 major or destroyed homes. So it's a relatively high bar to be able to meet for that.
Well, if you could help me understand, what happens if the total amount appropriated is expended and then we have another disaster happen?
So we would work with the governor's budget office on that to be able to take a look at that. So money is moved over as part of the disaster proclamation process. So we use those funds to be able to use those for that disaster. But if we would exceed that, we would work with the governor's budget office on that to make sure that we don't exceed, I think it's 20 million in 1 year.
So my last question, Mr. Chairman, I ask your mercy here. Are there unused funds from previous fiscal years that are available for reallocation in a case like you just discussed?
That would be a great question. We can get back to you on that, but most of the time it is evolving with the projects. So like right now with Debbie, we're still scoping a lot of the projects that are associated with that. So it's more likely than not that we would need more funding for the non-federal match as opposed to less funding for that. So that is kind of evolving based on the disaster, but we can definitely get back to you with kind of an analysis on that.
We would really appreciate that because obviously, sure. I'm sure you've heard we're trying to address a significant future shortfall, and we want to be as responsible as we can. And of course, we always want to make sure that Pennsylvanians, when disaster strikes, have the resources that they need. So
right,
I appreciate your response here today. Thank you, and we'll look forward to receiving that information. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.